Should you buy Spec Ops The Line in 2021? Spec Ops The Line is one of those games that was kind of forgotten by the masses of gamers, especially during the time it was released in 2012 due to the incredible games coming out around its release date, and yet it's still one of the most talked about and analysed games of the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation. Is Spec Ops The Line as good as many said, and does Spec Ops hold up in 2021? Spec Ops The Line is a third-person shooter set in an abandoned Dubai where 3 squad members are sent in to evacuate civilians only to go on a journey through Dubai, slowly corrupting their sanity. It sounds awesome, but is Spec Ops The Line worth buying in 2021? This is my Spec Ops The Line review. We'll be talking narrative and gameplay. Welcome to Classic Game Reviews, where we go back in time and take a look at the games of the past, and today's game is, as I've mentioned, Spec Ops The Line. Thank you to everyone who subscribed, I really appreciate the support. I will say it right off the bat, Spec Ops The Line has a brilliant narrative, and while it's definitely aged in execution due to the glitchy camera cuts and rough audio design, that doesn't stop the game from exploring the themes it really wants to. Spec Ops The Line pulls no punches. It truly shows how war can affect the people surrounded by it and the consequences soldiers face when making split-second decisions that could save or end lives in an instant. Voice acting is actually really good, and while it feels gamey in many ways, Nolan North pulls everything back to add some sort of realism to the squad, and that further is elevated by the twists and turns of the story. If you love games that really put you in the mind of the protagonist, this game will be perfect for you. Spec Ops is less about war itself and more about the people it affects, and in that sense the scale of the game is so much smaller compared to other games focused on being anti-war, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, etc. This really helps to set the stakes and makes you care about what is actually going on with these people. They could turn at a moment's notice, or you could just be doubting them for no reason, much like a leader of a squad when you're in these kinds of situations. There are too many themes to list, I'll be honest, so I'll just quickly move on to the world that's been built for this game. The world tells a story itself, which is the best way to do it. Dubai invaded by sand, inhabited by civilians and rogue military soldiers fighting to survive through any means necessary. The player really has to question what happened to a city like Dubai to be abandoned, and the answers are never really given to you properly, but that's what makes it work for me. I think a lot of movies and games feel like they need to tell the player and explain everything that happened to make it more believable, so it's always cool when games and movies leave things ambiguous and make you imagine what could have happened. I would say letting people make their own stories up in their head makes it even easier to buy into it if the foundation for the player's imagination is there, like a massive city, like Dubai, falling. Spec Ops has an incredible narrative if you can buy into it, as well as being able to handle the aged graphics. It's a rough cinematic experience compared to what we expect today, but if you're looking at a game from 2012, I don't know what to tell you. It's going to be a bit aged, it's going to be a bit rough. I think it was incredibly risky to tell the stories the writers did, and I do think the story is worth your time, especially for less than £10 on Steam. That's incredible value. The gameplay here is the weakest part. It hasn't aged particularly well, but it has this old charm to it, and even has some pretty cool environmental mechanics, like being able to use sand to drown your enemies, or even creating cover by creating a little cloud of sand after using a grenade to run away and find cover. I did play on PC, so I will be talking about PC controls, and they are a bit odd. Sprint and taking cover is the same button, and at first I wasn't a fan, but I really got used to it, which eventually made the game feel a bit more cinematic, more so in gameplay than actual cinematics at times, which is pretty cool in my opinion. Artificial intelligence isn't great, and I really didn't expect great AI. A lot of the enemies look out of cover for a few seconds, occasionally get a shot off, and don't get me wrong, the game can be quite difficult at times when they start introducing multiple enemy types like the heavy or shotgun archetypes that will charge you no matter what, creating an intense experience. Weapon variety is lacking, however. Each weapon definitely feels different, but my personal favourite was the starting assault rifle, which lets you equip a silencer to give you that really silent and deadly feel that I really enjoy. There are SMGs, shotguns, rocket launchers and snipers, but there is only one gun of each type, apart from the AK-47 and carbine, which are both assault rifles. In my experience, I may have missed some because it is quite a short game. Set pieces are great as well, and while they have been done better in games like Uncharted, Spec Ops The Line has the dirty feel to it that gives it a unique experience to the player, making you more invested than you originally think you would be. These set pieces are incredibly linear, and it's clear the developers were heavily held back by budget, but it could have been a lot worse. This is a linear game, so let's talk level design. The levels here aren't particularly impressive due to Spec Ops following a cover-based formula, but even with that said, I think the levels do what they are supposed to do. give you something to shoot at while keeping you invested into the narrative that's being told, and to the extent it really does that well. I think Spec Ops has some great cover-based shooter elements, but the king of that design will always be Gears of War due to how refined those mechanics are now. The levels are clearly designed with a narrative in mind, slowly introducing you to the horrors of war and in some cases making you a part of it, but I won't spoil too much. You slowly uncover the insanity lurking below Dubai's sand cover, and with each passing level things get bigger and shocking, and actually leaves you feeling really conflicted about the actions that have been taken, which just elevates everything in terms of gameplay and narrative. So Spec Ops isn't the best in terms of level design itself, or gameplay mechanics actually, but it certainly holds its own against big franchises even today if you can get invested into the story. The squad mechanic is honestly quite pointless. It's not very well made in my opinion, and it's honestly useless, as your squad mates tend to take care of themselves anyway, but they actually do shoot enemies, which is quite rare in these squad-based games, believe it or not. Overall, Spec Ops The Line does hold up really well even today, and while, like always, it has aged pretty poorly in some sections, the story Spec Ops tells is just absolutely worth experiencing, and you should absolutely buy Spec Ops The Line when you can. Thank you for watching.